I've been describing 7 different hidden roots of gender dysphoria and the wildly different experiences, drivers, and meanings behind a trans identity. People use the word trans to describe really different personal experiences. And at the same time, people also believe that being trans is an internal, fixed, and essential part of who someone is. But this essentialist definition of trans doesn't always make sense because it can't account for the range of outcomes and experiences that people may have after social or medical transition. Some people transition and genuinely feel better and move on with their lives, while others don't get any relief, and many even realize their distress was about something else entirely. And other people have more ambivalent experiences with a mix of positive and negative feelings about aspects of their transition. So when the word trans starts to mean everything to everyone, it risks meaning nothing at all. So in this video, I want to offer a more useful definition of what it means to be trans, one that can account for the wide range of experiences that we've covered without collapsing into contradiction. Welcome to The Metaphor of Gender. I'm Sasha, a therapist, and this channel is for curious people who prefer deep thinking over dogma. We explore identity, meaning, and how to live life well. In the last several videos, we looked at the hidden roots of gender dysphoria. These are 7 different root factors that might lie behind the diagnosis. While these hidden roots can overlap and shift over time, each one involves different emotions, conflicts, desires, and challenges. But despite these very different experiences, gender dysphoria is often treated as synonymous with being trans. And once someone adopts that label, it's often assumed they're going to follow the same pathway: social transition, name change, and maybe even medical interventions. These actions are seen as the standard way to relieve dysphoria. In other words, it's just what trans people do. For some, that might work well. Going through this process, they'd start to feel better, have less feelings of incongruence, and alleviate some or maybe even all of their dysphoria. And when that happens, nobody thinks twice about the definition of being trans, right? A trans person is someone with dysphoria who feels better after transition. But what about when that pathway doesn't help? What if someone transitions socially, medically, or both, and the distress doesn't go away, or even gets worse? Or maybe some things get kind of better, but not as much as the person expected. Were they never really trans to begin with? Well, I think that's actually the wrong question. The issue is not about whether people are mistakenly identifying as trans when they really aren't. The real issue is that we are defining trans all wrong. I have been thinking about this for years. I've been speaking to people about their gender dysphoria for years. And I've worked with people across the spectrum of trans, detrans, disillusioned, questioning, and everything in between. And the only definition of trans that makes any sense to me now is this: trans is not a state of being, it's a strategy. Rather than being some immutable internal essence, trans is a strategy that people can apply in response to their feelings. Now, these can be private psychological strategies like thoughts, reflections, frames of mind, and mental ways a person can interpret their emotions. Trans can also mean social strategies, like changing pronouns, trying out a new presentation, or going by a different name. And it can mean physical strategies like binding or tucking. And of course, it can also include medical strategies like starting hormones or pursuing surgery. And again, all of these strategies are attempts to relieve distress and incongruence or to change someone's relationship to their body and to themselves. Framing trans this way as a strategy may seem inconsequential. Maybe you're thinking, I'm just trying to make something big out of semantics or minor differences. But actually, this subtle shift has massive implications for people who are struggling with gender dysphoria. First of all, it gives people much more freedom because it eliminates a huge amount of pressure. For one, There's a lot of pressure to try and analyze yourself down to the minutia to figure out if you are or are not trans. That happens when people define trans as a specific type of human. Are you or are you not that specific type of person? And there's also the pressure that exists when you declare trans as part of your core identity, because something like that feels fixed. This can inadvertently close off other creative ways of understanding your experience of dysphoria and what meaning it plays in your life. So when we look at trans as a strategy instead, we have the ability to ask much more useful questions. For example, is this strategy that I'm using helpful? If so, how and why? And if not, what other strategies might I want to try here? Are there other ways forward that fall outside of this commonly recommended pathway? And look, no one strategy is inherently right or wrong, good or bad. The psychological, social, physical, or medical strategies of trans, well, they're just simply strategies. And like all strategies, they can be adaptive or maladaptive. And even that can change over time, because maybe a strategy that was useful to you at one stage of your life simply may not be as useful in a later stage. Let me just define this. A person might say a strategy is adaptive if it actually helped resolve the underlying distress and it's considered worth the trade-offs involved. Maladaptive strategies, on the other hand, might offer some short-term relief, but may not be considered worth the trade-offs and sacrifices involved. Strategies can also be considered maladaptive if they don't actually relieve the underlying issue behind the distress. So, instead of asking, am I really trans? A more useful question might be, is my strategy to gender dysphoria adaptive or maladaptive for me right now? What about in a year, in 5 years, or 20 years? And this is actually really important because nobody can predict exactly how someone with gender dysphoria will respond to the psychological, social, physical, or medical strategies involved in our definition of trans. Look, even the most dogmatic gender-affirming therapists admit that no one has a crystal ball to predict who will and who will not benefit in the long term from transition. So trans as a strategy is really the only way to make sense of this conundrum. So I invite you to get out of this essentialist thinking and try this reframe for yourself. What inconsistencies in your experience actually get resolved when you free yourself up to think about trans as a strategy? Are there aspects of your experience that actually make more sense with this reframe? I would really love to hear your thoughts, so please leave them below. All right, that's it for today. Keeping one foot in reality and one in possibility. I'll see you next time. This information is meant for educational purposes only and not as a substitute for mental health services.